Well, good morning, everyone. Schedules to be with us today. I also want to thank Geisinger for sponsoring this breakfast this morning and doing so for so many years, and for making these legislative breakfasts impactful, especially in these times of COVID. And I want to welcome, just for 2 seconds, Dan Lansberg from Geisinger to say a few words.
Thanks, Rico. Good morning. My name is Dan Lammersberg. I'm the Associate Vice President of Operations for Geisinger's Northeast region. It's our opportunity to have Geisinger to be presenting sponsor for this morning's legislative breakfast. As a community, we've banded together in the face of unprecedented challenges, which is why it's so important to bring this group together to discuss our region's future. This opportunity for our community leaders to share ideas for new ways forward allows us to explore developments in education, commerce, infrastructure, healthcare, and public service, to name just a few of the topics at the core of our way of life. At a time when coming together to accomplish anything in the midst of the pandemic has become increasingly difficult, I really would like to thank everybody here for coming together to facilitate this discussion, and for those who are joining us virtually as well. At Geisinger, our vision is to make better health easier for people and for the communities we serve. And I know today we gather a group of people dedicated to making our day-to-day life in Northeast Pennsylvania better, healthier, and safer all around. And with that, thank you for joining us this morning, and I'll turn it back over to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Dan, and again, thanks to Geisinger for hosting us here today. I also want to take a moment to thank our local media celebrity back here, my good friend, Mehalshick, for once again helping us to moderate this event and to utilize his renowned investigative skills to help in the dialogue. You know, with COVID altering our socioeconomic landscape, our questions for our legislators today has been recalibrated toward how do we bilaterally respond to the pandemic, return to business, and reimagine a future that gets us back to a sense of normalcy, a sense of sustainability, and a sense of renewed growth. You know, our legislators have each been very active during this pandemic, getting financial aid and needed help to those businesses and those families in the Valley who need it. And we would like to begin today with our legislators doing a quick 3 to 5 minute introduction to focus on COVID and talk about some of the really needed. And then once done, we're going to turn it over to Andy, maybe to kick this off and say a few words to the audience. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We could thank you to the Chamber of Commerce, our sponsor Geisinger, and all of you for coming out, and all of those online watching us live stream today. I want to thank the Chamber, many of the leaders, business leaders in the room. The community here in northeastern Pennsylvania really has rallied against this unprecedented global War II that has brought every nation, every person in the world to one issue, and that is the COVID-19 pandemic. One thing that has been missed, we are without question and probably the most divisive and partisan political times in our country's history, but we have rallied. And in the last 6 months, 6 to 7 months, there's been tremendous bipartisan achievement on several fronts. Republicans and Democrats and independents in Washington delivered on a federal aid package that delivered money to the states, to our counties, to our communities, our schools, our hospitals. Pennsylvania got together as Democrats, Republicans, and Independents and drove out those dollars to help our nursing homes. That's one area that was a particular concern of mine. It's the epicenter of the pandemic. Over 2/3 of the deaths related to COVID in Pennsylvania are in our nursing homes. Our nursing home residents are the most vulnerable citizens in this pandemic, and unfortunately, whether it was resources from the federal government or the state government or guidance from the federal government or the state government, it was lacking, and many of our local nursing homes suffered. Healthcare workers on the front line contracted the virus. Nursing home residents contracted the virus. Families were separated from one another, couldn't be with their loved ones when they were battling disease or lost the battle to the disease. And local business leaders really stepped up to the plate with the All One Foundation, located here in Wilkes-Barre. We were able to create the Northeastern Pennsylvania Nursing Home SOS program with a founding donation from the Earth Conservancy. Thanks Terry Ostrowski and the board, chairman of the board, John McCarthy. $250,000 that was matched by the All One Foundation. So we were able to have $500,000 that was then matched, thanks to Tim McGinley and Dave Pedri and our county council, by Luzerne County, and Jerry Natariani, the chair of the Lackawanna County Commissioners, matched with another $250,000. So we have amassed over $1 million in a local program where the federal and state government may have been failing in delivering personal protection equipment. We have driven out, since April, nearly 500,000 pieces of PPE to 30 nursing home facilities here in northeastern Pennsylvania, in counties like Luzerne, Carbon, Lackawanna, and Monroe. That wouldn't happen if there wasn't collaborative leadership. If there's one criticism I could make of those that aren't on board with working together in this pandemic, you have to face a worldwide threat in a collaborative fashion. It needs to be teamwork, it needs to be a team, and I keep saying it in every interview that I have. If we're gonna be in this together, we gotta work together. And in northeastern Pennsylvania, with programs like the Northeastern Nursing Home SOS program, or when the South Valley Council of Governments and the Mountain Council of Governments got 30 communities together and their code enforcement officers to go and make 140 inspections of our area businesses along the 81 corridor to help make sure workers are safe when they were going to work at our big logistics centers along that corridor. 140 inspections by local officers. To date, we have not had the Department of Health or OSHA come in and inspect those facilities. So again, kudos to local leaders for stepping up and responding to this pandemic. I'm very proud of northeastern Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much, Senator. You know, Aaron, I know the senator's a tough follow-up, but how about if you could introduce yourself and give your opening comments.
Thanks. Good morning. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for having us as always. I appreciate it. As the senator was saying, you know, COVID rocked our county and rocked our Commonwealth. Obviously, we're a hot spot. When I say rocked our county, I don't mean like a 60 concert by Eddie Day and TNT, but I mean something quite different. But I think what you're seeing as things are changing, things aren't going to get back to the way they were anytime soon. And anybody that expects it is, I think, misguided in that regard. I think you have a dynamic economy right now that is changing pretty drastically and pretty quickly. You know, where you had a lot of companies that were located inside of cities, I think that's changing pretty quickly. People moving out of cities. I've seen it in my hometown of Kingston, a lot of people moving in from New York City, from Brooklyn, primarily into the Kingston and West Side, which is a great growth. I mean, our real estate market has been some of the hottest because people don't want to be inside that city dynamic after what they have witnessed. So moving forward and understanding, you know, that what has been done, in my opinion, from the federal government and through of the impact on our businesses has been a little disproportionate. And I say that because of the economics and the impact early on when we were talking about some of the programs that were out there. Big businesses were able to access them and our small mom and pops were not. The different funds, the loans and things that were out there, you know, I kept on hearing, at least I believe this to be true, that all the paperwork and that was required, you needed a special accounting degree in order just to be able to figure it out. And so you have our small businesses all scattered throughout Luzerne County trying to make heads and tails of the paperwork. And thank you to people like Dorothy Lane. Thank you for your help with the Small Business Development Council and others here for helping people navigate that system and try to figure it out. So as we're looking and talking about recovery moving forward, I think you have a two-tiered approach. You have to be talking about what's at the larger corporate scale of what needs to be done, and also what's going on at the mom and pop level of what needs to be done. And when I talk about the larger businesses, I mean, it's about giving assurances to our business. We passed something from our finance committee about our net operating losses and being able to extend that to help our larger businesses want to extend the losses that they've had in our state and make sure they're not picking up and leaving our state, because our net operating losses laws in Pennsylvania don't line up with the federal law, nor do they line up with what many other states are doing. You look at what we can do for our small mom and pops, and I applaud Luzerne County for giving $11 million just yesterday, announcing the grant program. But I think we as a state need to step up to the plate too. We still have grant money from the CARES Act that we can put out. I'm a sponsor of legislation that would put out of the over $1 billion we had, to take $250 million of it and give every small mom and pop bar and restaurant in Pennsylvania $25,000 each. And that doesn't even make them whole. That does not make them whole. It helps cut some of the losses that they had during this pandemic, but it certainly does not make them whole. There's more we have to be doing. We have to be looking at it at a multi-tiered approach, but especially I think there's been a lot of support out there for the larger businesses, and during this time there has not been nearly enough for our smaller businesses.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that very much. Next, I'd like to ask Representative Mike Carroll, my good buddy, and the transportation expert of the area, to maybe make some comments as well.
Fair enough. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Rico and Andy. Thank you for doing this, and to the Chamber and Geisinger for your sponsorship this morning. You know, when the middle of March arrived this year and everyone was subjected to the word pandemic, it was a heart stopper for me, and I think a heart stopper for many, because first of all, it was an experience none of us had ever had in our lives. No one quite knew what to expect with a pandemic because we had never experienced it before, whether the we being individually or even as a community or a nation. And so the onset of a pandemic in the United States, the onset of a pandemic in Pennsylvania, really threw us for a loop. It threw the entire world, I think, for a loop. It threw our country and our state and region, like everywhere else, for a loop. And the dramatic and sad consequences of this pandemic: 8,100 Pennsylvanians dead, over 210 or roughly 210,000 United States citizens dead, untold disruptions to workers and businesses and schools and universities. Really, every facet of life has been affected. Just look around. We have only a handful of people here today, when normally we're in a large ballroom with so many more people. People wearing masks rightly. The challenges of this are tremendous, and it has federal level down to the local level and everything in between. People have tried their best to get this right. In a lot of ways, dealing with the pandemic and the response to the pandemic is similar, in my view, to investing, insofar as this is all about risk tolerance. And everybody has a different level of risk tolerance that they're willing to employ. Some people believe that there's no real risk at all, that everything is fine, the whole thing is a hoax, and we can carry on as normal. And then there are other people who think that it's tremendously dangerous, and they choose not to leave the house. And everybody is somewhere in that spectrum of where they are in the risk tolerance level. We as a government, in the state government at least, have had challenges trying to get this right, in my view. It couldn't come at a worse time, considering the hyper-political season that this all happens in. At the onset in March, right through today, it being an election year, a federal election and a state election, it complicates things tremendously. Because, you know, overlapping the dealing with a pandemic, you have the usual shenanigans related to campaign season. But I think, at least for me, and I think the people here on the dais today, we've done our level best to try and represent the folks in our community, to try and manage the risk in a way that we allow for safe continuation of operations, whether it be schools or businesses, but recognize the reality of 8,100 Pennsylvanians being dead. And for those that choose to ignore that, I think they're making a mistake. We head now into the winter season, when there'll be more indoor events, There'll be more episodes, in my opinion, and really the most important thing that can happen is for our pharmaceutical companies to complete the work on a vaccine so that we can return to some normalcy. Because absent that vaccine, it's going to be really hard to return to what things were pre-March. The government can do whatever they want with respect to opening businesses and opening schools. People will vote with their feet, and they will make a decision as to whether or not they're going to go to school or go to a restaurant. And the best way to get them to vote with their feet in a positive way is to provide medical protection and vaccine offers. So there's tremendous work to do. I'm proud of the work that we've done collectively here in northeastern Pennsylvania, but there's much to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. Next, I'd like to introduce a man that has never had trouble socially projecting with that lyrical voice of his. I want to introduce Rep. Eddie Day Kuczynski.
Thank you very much, Wico, to Geisinger, to the Chamber for all you do, for your strength in continuing with the process of living. This pandemic certainly was something totally unique. It's horrific, and yet whenever there's a tragedy or a catastrophe, it gives us an opportunity to do some good things. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that this pandemic has brought people together that never would have been discussing and trying to share their concerns. In the very beginning, if we go back to the middle of March, we began to see some horrific images on the television. The folks in New York, the constant emergencies, the ambulances, and then the refrigeration trucks. We saw this horror of countless people dying, and it brought forth a sense of fear because there were so many unknowns. So the first several months, everyone was scrambling, just trying to deal with the emergencies. Every single day, we got hundreds of calls from people all over our area asking for help. Now that we've had a few months to take a look and see what's transpired, now's the time for us to plan for the future. And that is extremely important and extremely difficult because there are still so many unknowns. Will we have a vaccine? Will it cure? When will we have the vaccine? Do we have the testing? Are the tests accurate? Can the tests be accurate in a week, 5 days, a day, in hours? We still have countless challenges. Earlier today, Senator mentioned the word together, and that is the one word that we need. Together. We all have to work together, put the politics aside, and create an atmosphere where all of us can share our thoughts, our questions, our potential solutions. And now that several months have passed, that's what we're trying to do. I think it becomes obvious that we need the accurate testing so that we can begin to create a more normal business atmosphere, a more normal lifetime of activities. More and more people are becoming a little bit more confident, coming out into the communities. We've seen that in some of our malls. We've seen that in some of our outside restaurants. But what just occurred with the president has now made it a reality once again. There's no one else in the entire United States, probably the world, that would have the safest conditions to work in than the President of the United States, and of course the unfortunate thing that just occurred. So that danger is still out there, and that's why we're going to have to be creative and work together on how we survive. How we survive, and then how can we actually create progress. I think that over the last several months, there's been many attempts to try to find the right solutions. And one of the, Aaron mentioned it, so did Representative Carroll, about trying to balance the money. How do we help those small businesses? Where do you get that money from? We've talked about the possibility of floating no-interest bonds to give us operating capital. If we have operating capital in order to survive the length of time that it's going to take our medical and our science industry to create the vaccines and to create the tests, so we can actually have somewhat of a normal life, we need that operating capital. Where are we going to get that operating capital? Will the defense fund, the National Defense Fund, be that key in order to get those kinds of testing that's going to be needed in order for us to be able to be tested and then conduct business? All of those things are questions that need to be answered. So I'm going to promote togetherness because that's what it's going to take. Forget the politics. Let's come together, figure out what we need on every aspect of business in our lives. Thank you, Rico.
Eddie, thank you so much for your comments. You know, as we've all said today, I mean, COVID has been particularly difficult for all of us. But I would like to say that I really think that as a county, we've really stepped up to the plate a lot. I mean, you know, I take a look at what we've done in the county relative to forming that crisis management team that Tim and his team put together with business leaders and healthcare professionals. I think that was awesome. Take at least a first step to try and take care of some of those issues. So with that in mind, we wanted to invite County Council Chair Tim McGinley to our session as well. And Tim, I'd like you to provide some opening remarks, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Rico. I'd like to thank the Geisinger and the Chamber for hosting this event this morning. It's quite a bit different than what I'm used to. Usually I see a lot of different faces out there in the audience. But this morning, obviously, with the ongoing health situation, we have to deal with it. And I think we've done a great job in that aspect, putting together a nice event with the conditions. As Rico indicated, you know, for Aaron, when he spoke after the senator, that's sort of a tough call. How about talking after all these guys? That's my call. So it's a little bit difficult, but we'll try to do the best we can. You know, the county governor is a lot closer to people in the area. Obviously, Luzerne County is right here. People, for the most part, all reside here and live here and work here. And so it's very important what we do in the county. You see the results day to day. Well, I'd like to take a minute and talk about a few things that went on during the pandemic and then talk about how the county is trying to respond to some of it. As you realize, very early on, we were one of the counties that was among the worst in the Commonwealth as far as the number of cases. And it took a great effort by a lot of different people, particularly at the municipal level, to get that under control, and they did a great job. I have to congratulate the municipal officials. They really did a great job, and it was through their efforts that we were able to get our cases under control. We were able to move through those phases and get back to some kind of quote-unquote normalcy, whatever that may be. Particularly the greater Hazelton area did a great job, and I want to commend them for that. I also want to say, you know, the county is faced with the courthouse. We have 1,500 plus employees. Hundreds of people come in and out of the courthouse every day. We had to put measures in place in the courthouse in order to provide for the safety of our staff and our people who visit every day. And so we've continued with that. And if you go to the courthouse, there are procedures going in and coming out so we can keep track of people. We can make sure that, you know, we're sanitizing. We can make sure that everybody's safe. And we've continued with that, and it's worked out very well. And I want to commend our administrative people because they put it all together. They put those plans together. They got it working. They got everybody to work together, as you've heard that term, to make it very successful. Our court system is now starting to over some of the activities. They're also using the arena, and the arena was very kind to us to open that up and say, yes, you can use our facility and we'll help because of the social distancing. So you see some activities going on that are very, very creative, and you know, it's through those efforts of those people involved to come up with those ideas. I want to also say that all our services in the county are open. They are open. It may be a little bit more difficult as far as the contacts, etc., but everything is open and operating. So if you have a need, you have to have something filed, whatever that may be, it's available. Some you can do online, some you may have to do in person, but the people were backed up, but we've gotten that all straightened out, and people are working constantly to bring it back up to normal. A little bit about the CARES funding, and that was mentioned by several people. You know, the CARES funding came from the federal government, came through the state offices and down into the county. Each of the counties across the Commonwealth got a certain allotment of money. Luzerne County was fortunate enough to get $28,400,000 as our allotment, which was a very nice sum to work with.
but obviously our needs are very great. Of that $28 million, roughly $8 million the county had to put aside for county expenses and county services. The rest of the money, that $20 million roughly, is going out into the community. Some of our youth recreational programs have received some of that money already. The municipalities have received some money to help with some of their expenses, to cover like the sanitation, machines, etc. that they had to purchase. Also, our school districts have received some of that money. And also some of the private schools that are part of Luzerne County have received some of that money to help with the safety of our children. And finally, probably the one that's the biggest and the most important maybe to many people in this room is the funding for small private businesses and nonprofits. 15 employees or less, about $500,000 in revenue in a normal year. Those programs have just started. It's announced today. There's a couple different articles in different papers. And if you wish, you can go to our LuzerneCounty.org, which is our webpage, and all the information can be found there. And there is places to call there. You can call us because, as you indicated earlier by many of our speakers, that was an area that some people felt there was not enough emphasis, there wasn't that. It's very important. The other thing that's probably most important as far as the county is that, all our technology now, obviously with all the things that are going on, we have to upgrade all our technology, and we're in the process of doing that. And I think as we go forward, you're going to see, I know it's tough for certain people like in my age bracket, but we have to learn to do it too. So please take advantage. The county is here for you. We try to do the best we can. If you have suggestions, ideas, whatever, email if you can. Send a note if you can. We'll try to help wherever possible. But thank you. Again, thanks this morning for everyone coming out. Thanks to the sponsors.
Carmen Majestra, and from M&T. He's chair of our Government Affairs Committee and the Government Affairs Committee for helping us put the questions together for today. And so with that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to Andy to start some of the questions to our...
We're glad to be here with all of you here, those of you who might be viewing from wherever your offices are or your companies, and of course our lawmakers and the county chairman. Thank you again. I'm honored to be part of the event once again this year. So we have questions I will ask to every lawmaker. So I'm not going to use my readers, so I stretch out a little bit. Some revel in that happening. Okay, what's a badge of honor? There are new reports indicating that more and more of our small mom and pop restaurants and retailers may not survive if the economy. What are your thoughts on how we can continue to gain access to CARES Act funding or tax rebates or stimulus?
As you heard in the opening remarks, delivering relief to our small businesses has been the focus of both the federal, state, and county governments, trying to drive out millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to small businesses. But it's still not going to be enough. Larry Newman, who runs the downtown business district, was in the paper recently saying sales are off 50 to 80% for downtown businesses. Generally, there's 5,000 to 6,000 employees in downtown Wilkes-Barre. Places like Guard Insurance with 800 employees, Highmark with 600 employees. Guys, all of these businesses now are working remotely. A lot of the small mom and shop restaurants, diners, luncheonettes, all of them have been devastated, not only by COVID and the response to COVID. We've had very aggressive measures in Pennsylvania, more aggressive than most states in terms of shutting down businesses. A lot of that has been arbitrary. One of the things that has alarmed me, I reference collaborative leadership. Representative Brzezinski referenced working together, putting politics aside. That's what we should be doing. But recently there was a federal court case where a federal judge struck down Governor Wolf's orders on gathering limits and on the definition of essential and non-essential businesses. That has been stayed by a second federal judge, but what came out of the testimony was very alarming to me. How did the governor make a decision to shut down essential and non-essential businesses? Because what we've all heard as legislators is, why were the big box stores open and 1,500, 2,000 people roaming around a big box store and the mom and pop was shut down. Well, we were able to peek behind the curtain in how this process unfolded in the governor's office. And understand, it was the governor's office. The legislature was not part of the decision-making process. The governor declared an emergency, and a group of his policy staff, not scientific experts, not healthcare experts, not economic experts. I would have wished that they would have reached out to Wico and his counterparts across and said, how can we make sure we save lives and we save businesses? We save livelihoods and lives. How can we operate safely in a pandemic? It's evolved. There's no criticism of Governor Wolf for trying his best, or any other official for trying his best to react to an unfolding disease that we're learning about each and every day. But shutting down the economy, disrupting the lives, there are family businesses here in northeastern Pennsylvania that have been in business for 3-4 generations. They're going to shut their doors. I don't know if there's a government program invented in the history of man that's going to be able to bring them back. That's painful to me, to watch somebody who has spent their entire life to build up a business, invest their family resources, their sweat equity into building a business, and then a group of partisan policy staffers without any expertise determine they're non-essential and they got to be shut down. That needs to be further investigated by the General Assembly. We have to look at that, and we got to get it right. We're going to face these emergencies in the future. We got to do better in terms of having the legislature, the judicial, and the executive branch all working together, not unilateral decisions by the executive branch that relegates the General Assembly to an advisory committee. We're not an advisory committee. We're elected by the people of Pennsylvania to be in the room and to help make the decisions. More importantly, leaders in the business community need to be in that room. We need the expertise of the Chamber of Commerce and other industry groups to help us manage this, to make sure our workplaces are safe. So one, yes, we got to continue, and I hope, to dear God, that there's another federal stimulus package to drive out and to help businesses try to stay afloat as we get through the pandemic, to help the Commonwealth get through its budget deficit, which is now reaching $5 billion. But we need to make sure that when a government makes a decision to shut down a business, that they have good reason, that it's been vetted by every possible expert, and that we get it right. I don't think it was done in the right fashion here in Pennsylvania.
What we'll do to save some time, folks, if that's okay, I'll ask the question, then whoever would like to answer the question, instead of going around just for time's sake, okay? Anyone else want to address that question? Any day?
The Senator brought up some great points, and that's why I mentioned to you about operating capital. If we had operating capital to pay those businesses while they were closed, so to analyze this pandemic, still with so many unknowns, how do we go forward? I want to point out in the beginning, again, the travesty that we saw in New York, there was an immediate reaction to shut things down to try to do what? Save people's lives. New York has 19 million residents. They lost over 33,000 New Yorkers, died. New Jersey has 9 million residents. They lost 16,000 residents. Pennsylvania, we have about 13 million people. And unfortunately, we're now at 8,100 Pennsylvania lives. So the problem with this darn pandemic, you can't see it. When we had the flood of '72, everything closed. There was no question. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't have business because nothing was open, and it wasn't open because the area was flooded and destroyed, damaged. Then you had to get together and rebuild. The problem with this pandemic is you can't see it. The people that want to stay home because they're scared. They don't know what the answer is. So we need to work on several different fronts. One, we need the operating capital to give to the businesses to be able to maintain themselves until we get the testing and the vaccines, that people then have the trust in order to come back out and go to the various restaurants and businesses and cruise ships and theaters, etc. So it's a combination of several of those things. And like I said in the beginning, it was panic. What do? We don't want these deaths, so you close everything down. The collaboration is key. Senator mentioned the collaboration. And again, Monday morning quarterback, we can all think about things how we would have done it in the game differently. Playing in the game on Sunday is quite different than what you have to do on Monday. But we're all here to, so how do we deal with that? And that's where this collaboration that the senator talked about is even more important. So that we bring everybody together, we need to hear from everyone to decide what course of action we're going to continue to take. And that's what I'd like to encourage. The word again is together. There's a heck of a lot of people out there that still don't believe this exists. Am I right? People still insist you don't need to wear a mask. The tragic thing that occurred to our president, who is the most protected individual in the entire country, he got it. So as a result, that fear keeps people in their homes. So even if businesses open, that doesn't mean they're going to be able to be profitable. So we have to approach this on several different fronts. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Okay, Aaron, would like to respond?
Yeah, I just want to add something too to this. You know, in regard to the collaboration, I was recently on a Zoom call with a Democratic legislator, one that I wouldn't say that I know overly well, but you know, during this, we were talking about the streamlining of information and collaboration, all that stuff that, you know, Senator Udicek and Representative Pashinsky, and I think that's one lesson that we can really take from this. I mean, during this phone call, I found out that the Secretary of Health and the state epidemiologist was on having Zoom calls and phone conferences with Democratic legislators. Unfortunately, that leaves out the Republican legislators from having that same streamlined information, be able to be looking at the same type of information. During a pandemic, when we should all be working together and having the same information, looking at the same data, that wasn't what was happening in government. I think that was part of the frustration, at least from myself and others, that we do be looking and talking about the same information, the same data, the decision points being made, how we can explain to our businesses what are these decisions that are being made and why. I did want, the question I think was about stimulus stuff, was part of this, so I wanted to comment on that if that's all right. You know, I mentioned already about House Bill 2615, which is my bill to take some of the CARES funding, get it out to our restaurants, $25,000 for our bars and taverns. But there's three other things. When I was here a year ago, I talked about three bills that I wanted to get across the finish line this year. And one of them is already done, that's Act 66, that I know there's a question later on that you're going to ask about. But when we're looking at what we can, and what I just wanted to say about stimulus is looking at our budget and what we're talking about. If we can come up with jobs plans that do not impact our budget now, but are going to grow revenue and grow jobs now is the time that we should be putting forward these plans. And when I talked a year ago about that, I put forward these three bills that don't impact our budget, but actually put jobs into our region, in our Commonwealth, in the short term, while making sure we grow our budget long term as well. And so, in having that economic benefit here as well. So, Act 66 was obviously a collaboration between business and labor, coming together, making sure we're getting those investments. We just had a hearing on it last week, where Perry Babb, a member who's building a facility in Clinton County, is going to spend $407 million to expand a natural gas synthesis project to use our dry natural gas that we have in northeastern Pennsylvania, using a tax credit model that Senator Udicek and I put together to see further investment and growth in Pennsylvania. We have other projects looking here in northeastern Pennsylvania, specifically Luzerne County, trying to put their footprint in Luzerne County now. And one of the best, most interesting things from this was hearing the gentleman in charge say, you know, the businesses are approaching us about investing here. We're not reaching out to them. They're reaching out to us about investing in Luzerne County. Hundreds of millions of dollars. That's the opportunity that we have with this. Another bill I wanted to quickly mention, I'm the sponsor of our community solar legislation. Another bill requires no budgetary funds, but will help drive jobs. They're talking about $2 billion in private investment coming into the Commonwealth, obviously renewable energy, thousands of jobs attached to that legislation as well. Once again, at prevailing wage rates, you're talking about good paying jobs here through community solar as well. And the last thing I wanted to comment, in the last bill I talked about a year ago, was our Transportation Reinvestment and Improvement Act, about trying to use the opportunities that we have with businesses trying to locate in our infrastructure when we have public roads that they cannot build on it because of a failing road network, to allow them to pay their taxes as they're building that road. That the taxes that they're paying to improve that area would actually go to pay for the cost of the road improvement. That way we're having a pro-growth policy. We're making sure we're growing jobs while taxes are still being paid, improving our infrastructure, and making sure we have growth in jobs at the same time. So we're making sure growing our budget, growing jobs, and making sure we're not impacting our budget. So those are the stimulus things that I think we can do at the state level, because obviously we're not the ones printing money. So we have to be able to make sure that we live within our means with our budget deficit that we're dealing with as well.
You know, Aaron, you're exactly right. Two times. That's when you really want to focus on those value propositions. I mean, you talked a little bit about Act 66, but there's also House Bill 1100.
No, X 1100 be right. I call it the Project Lazarus bill. We got it. We renegotiated with the governor, working on that bill, which eventually became Act 66. Which really took almost very similar provisions out of 1100, turned it into this bill that allows for natural gas to be the feedstock to actually grow jobs here in northeastern Pennsylvania. Each of these, in order to have this built, you have to have 800 jobs paid at prevailing wage rates, a minimum of $400 million of investment in order to reduce your tax liability. And none of it's front-loaded. It's all backloaded. So you have to hit these thresholds. You know, we're not giving away money. You're saying you need to hit these marks in order to do this. This one facility that I mentioned in Clinton County will be a net benefit of $320 million to our state budget. That's a pretty big number to be talking about how we're going to benefit our budget when we have a several billion-dollar gap. So when we're talking about what we can do here in Pennsylvania to grow jobs, that's what we're talking about. And these products are actually very green. If you want to talk about what we can do with natural gas and talk about what it's going to look like in a 21st century economy, you know, if you want to just put it in a pipeline and burn it, you can do that. That's what's happening right now. But if you want to take it and actually use carbon capture technology, which is actually in the legislation, take the carbon out, you actually capture that carbon so it doesn't go up into the atmosphere. You're using it now to make fertilizers. The other byproducts can make ammonia, diesel exhaust fluid, which removes the smog that's used in gasoline products and diesel. There's a lot of opportunity that lies ahead, and it's a huge growing area that we can capitalize on in northeastern Pennsylvania.
John?
Yeah, I wanted to be very, very careful not to interrupt my colleague. That seems not to be a popular debate form these days, to interrupt while another politician is speaking. But Aaron and I just want to underscore the importance of Act 66. Aaron very eloquently went through the importance of the legislation in terms of the jobs, but it's really to take a bill in March during a pandemic that's vetoed by the governor and to resurrect that bill and have the governor sign it by July, I don't think has ever happened in the history of Pennsylvania. And it speaks to working together in a bipartisan fashion to compromise. I applaud Governor Wolf, who had concerns with the original 1100. We were able to make some changes in the Senate to put in prevailing wage rates and benefits for the Pennsylvania construction trades. We were able to put in pro-environmental issues like carbon capture into the bill. And the governor came and he wanted to limit the fiscal impact, and we were able to limit the fiscal impact to just $26.6 million a year. But the importance of Act 66 in terms of getting northeastern Pennsylvania into the downstream game of Marcellus Shale, in the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, there's not many times that the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association stands arm in arm with labor. They stood arm in arm with labor because they recognize this act, this new law in Pennsylvania, the Local Resource Manufacturing Tax Credit, has the ability to leverage billions of dollars in private equity, generate over 4,400 new jobs, construction trade, and manufacturing. And as we all know, manufacturing jobs multiply across the economy, into transportation, into the sciences, into agriculture. Part of these plants might be building fertilizer plants, fertilizer facilities that now are really overseas, being produced overseas. We can reshore those jobs here in northeastern Pennsylvania, get northeastern Pennsylvania back in the manufacturing game, back to being a manufacturing giant. We already have 22,000 manufacturing jobs. A lot of people don't appreciate the manufacturing presence we have here in northeastern Pennsylvania. We have some great manufacturers along the 81 corridor. Act 66 is really about innovative tax policy. As Aaron mentioned, we're not the federal government. We don't get to print money. We don't get to deficit spend. We have a limited budget. So it's going to be hard to drive out straight grant dollars or loan dollars. So how do you attract business? You have to get innovative. When you have a tax credit where not a dime goes out the door for at least 3.5 to 4 years after a company has invested a minimum of $400 million, paid wages in the neighborhood, they have to pay prevailing wage rates and benefits before they get that tax credit. It's remarkable what we're going to be able to accomplish because of Act 66. That innovative tax policy we're looking at using in the data center. When we're talking, I know we're going to get to broadband and other things. That's our new world. Data centers, there's a bill in the Senate right now, Senate Bill 741. Scott Hutchinson has a bill that would exempt sales and use tax at the state and local level for those data centers that locate in Pennsylvania and spend a minimum of $35 to $60 million. Just like Act 66. Companies have to invest all of that money up front to get a tax credit on the back end, creating good quality, family-sustaining jobs in Pennsylvania. If we're going to grow the economy, we're going to get small businesses back on their feet, we have to get more innovative in our tax policy to help attract businesses here to Pennsylvania.
Okay, Senator, thank you very much. Next question. There have been some great wins on infrastructure grants like the multimodal grant in Pittston or the DCED gas grant. At the same time, there's concern that the deficit in short-term budget is going to lead to cuts in infrastructure and these grant growth opportunities. How can we set the balance right, getting help to people that need it, infrastructure to communities that need it, while simultaneously looking at ways to solve the state deficit problems caused by COVID-19? I'll aim that question to Mr. Transportation, Representative Mike Carroll.
Thank you, Andy. No small challenge there of reconciling all of those competing interests. I'll start by saying we're tremendously proud of the advancements in the transportation network. We're tremendously thankful for the award for the multimodal for PennDOT or for Pittston recently. That will alleviate a dangerous curve on North Main Street as it proceeds towards Duryea. Greater Pittston, I think, generally speaking, and northeastern Pennsylvania as a whole, has seen tremendous transportation improvements. Not just improvements in our highway and bridge network. As I drove here this morning, I looked up Cole Street, and I saw a beautiful streetscape, which is a new entrance to the city of Wilkes-Barre, not my area. Senator Yudichak and Representative Pyshinsky represent that area. But the advancements that we have made in our transportation network are noteworthy, and they're important. They provide a safe and efficient transportation network for us, and they improve the quality of life with our improvements downtown, many improvements here in Wilkes-Barre, New Wilkes and Kings, and the Square. Same thing I'm sure applies in Nanticoke and Hazleton as it does in Pittston and Scranton. And so the transportation network and the funding for these projects is siloed a bit from the general fund with respect to the way transportation dollars are dealt with in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, the motor license fund is a protected trust fund that is generally not subjected to advances from general fund needs. There are some exceptions, the state police and the Department of Agriculture, but generally our transportation dollars are for transportation projects. The challenge, like it exists with respect to the general fund and the $5 billion deficit there, is that the motor license fund has had a negative effect as a result of the COVID, with fewer gallons of gasoline being purchased, and the net effect that will have on the dollars available in our motor license fund for PennDOT projects, and I would offer that it applies to every state in the nation. How we reconcile those needs going forward, the importance of making sure we have a transportation network that meets the needs of all the developments along the corridor on 81 is a real challenge. Firstly, I would hope, and this applies on the general fund side as well, that our federal partners step forward and provide the next round of relief funds for state governments and for local governments. But when it comes to state government, one of the panelists mentioned it already, we are required to have a balanced budget. And with a $5 billion deficit on the general fund side, not counting the transportation side, that is a tremendous, tremendous challenge. And how Pennsylvania or any of the other states are going to be able to solve that, absent federal funding, will be quite painful. And so whether it's transportation funding or general funding for the budget, I hope that the U.S. senators, our U.S. members of Congress, and the President can come together and provide the financial resources these states need, including Pennsylvania, so that we are not subjected to tremendous challenges with respect to the budget. And I think most people know that in Pennsylvania we did a 5-month budget. That expires on November 30th. So the decisions on all of this have been pushed past the election. But the challenges are real. And without a federal partner, the challenges become even more exaggerated. So from the perspective of the needs of the community, the needs of our taxpayers, the needs of our residents, we do need a federal partner in this, whether it's on the general fund side or the transportation side.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, and Representative Carroll's correct. We are on the same page when it comes to infrastructure. If anyone doubts the power of infrastructure investments, I just want to tell you the story about the $90 million South Valley Parkway. The Wilkes-Barre Chamber of Commerce, the Earth Conservancy, early leaders and visionaries in this project to advance this project. It has spanned my entire 20 years in the General Assembly in the House and over in the Senate. Upon completion of that infrastructure investment, private company North Point has invested now nearly $600 to $700 million, private equity, and have helped create over 5,000 new jobs. National companies like Adidas, Chewy.com, Patagonia, True Value, Spreetail are all locating in the South Valley corridor in Hanover Township, Nanticoke, in Newport. Those jobs, which now have an entry wage of around $17 an hour, which translates into about $35,000 a year. Those jobs did not exist in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s for a graduate coming out of Greater Nanticoke Area High School on Kosciuszko Street, and now they can leave that with a high school diploma and have a shot at a great start. Not only $35,000 a year, 100% medical, and many of the companies with tuition reimbursement so they can walk across the street after they're done with a shift and go to the community college and get an associate's degree paid for by their company. That is the result of an infrastructure investment that has leveraged nearly approaching $1 billion in private investment in Hanover Township, Nanticoke, and Newport Township.
Okay, next question, turning to education. Our schools have been impacted by COVID-19, and there have been a number of actions taken to better fund our school districts while also advocating localized decision-making, improving education services, and getting state funding where needed. Can you weigh in on the balance we are seeing here in keeping our kids safe while at the same time keeping our schools and school programs open? Mr. Kraszewski?
Well, I'll tell you what, it has certainly been a challenge. If you remember, there was an immediate closure in the middle of March. All of a sudden, the kids were at home, and we did not have the electronic infrastructure to be able to get education to everyone. The school districts worked very hard to try to get the proper electronic equipment to each one of the children so that there would be some connectivity. And the new opening of the schools now, even if it's virtual, is 100 times better than it was in the spring of last year. We still suffer from the lack of broadband in so many districts throughout the state of Pennsylvania, including here in northeastern Pennsylvania. And now it's a matter of trying to get the major broadband companies to be able to expand and invest their dollars now into Pennsylvania in order to make sure that, not just from the standpoint of education, but from the standpoint of business, they can communicate electronically with their computers. The investment will be billions of dollars, and it's something that has to be addressed. And if we do not address it, Pennsylvania's areas will then be at a great disadvantage compared to those areas in our country that have that connectivity. So from the standpoint of education, that communication now between the school district, the teacher, the student, and the parent has improved dramatically. In Wilkes-Barre area and our surrounding school districts, many of them now have the teacher being exactly what we're doing here. The camera's on the teacher's teaching the children at home for those that chose to stay home. Some of our schools have given the option for the children to be able to come to school. And by the way, it seems to have worked out quite well in most cases, where they're not overcrowded. There's plenty of room for distancing. They've created a tremendous amount of sanitizing, and as a result, at this point, we've gone through, I think, 3 weeks where in most cases we're okay with you're in school. As pointed out before, the state's going to be $5 billion in the hole. We can't print money. Whether we call it bonds, whether we call it grants, we need the federal dollars to be able to help subsidize the cost of everything that goes on, not just within our education system, but within our business. So our school districts are doing the very best they can under the circumstances. More electronic connectivity would be very helpful. The cooperation at this point between the folks at home and the school district seems to be very, very well. So we talked about together, they are working together. They've recognized that we're under adverse circumstances, and they're trying to adapt the best as they can.
On that note, Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, just one more thing to add on top of this. I know Representative Pashinsky was talking a lot about the students and teachers and broadband and all things I agree with. One other thing I think is important and something I hope we're going to address is some of the support service staff that are there as well. I think, when these people are, when we have a school that's shut down because of a circumstance that people could be losing their health care during a 2-week layoff as we do our 14-day quarantines and things like that. I think that's something that I'm hoping we are going to address legislatively to make sure that people who are laid off or furloughed for temporary periods in between here, like our support staff who are not well paid, they are, they do struggle, and that I hope that's something we can do to help support as well with some of the education.
Those that have children, they've grown, but my 4 children are one in high school, 3 in elementary school. So let me say this. For every parent that has gone through this experience over the last 7 months and have had their children home, learning through distance learning, thank God and God bless teachers and the job that they do. If we don't appreciate teachers after this pandemic, I won't understand it. Appreciate the work they do. I also want to acknowledge the great work done by Tony Grieco through the pandemic to keep us informed on what the schools need. We're going to continue to drive out resources as we can. I think it was a smart decision by Governor Wolf to fund the schools for 12 months, even though the majority of the state budget was funded only at a 5-month level, to create a continuity, a level of certainty for families and for school districts that the schools would be fully funded at a flat rate for the next 12 months. So I think that was a smart decision. And one other note, we just participated in a news event where Hazleton Area School District became the first school in the country, not in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, first school in the country to deploy this innovative technology, Ultra-Pure disinfection system created by BioHigh-Tech. It's a medical grade disinfection system that they are deploying in their classrooms. That is mobile, that they can move from building to building and classroom to classroom, recognizing that yes, we're going to be battling COVID for the foreseeable future, but we're also going to be battling the flu. This machine takes 100% of every virus and bacteria in that room and disinfects it. So you can be safe as a parent, as a teacher, as a staff, auxiliary staff, that the school district is doing all it can. We need to do more to get resources to schools like Hazleton area and all the others here in northeastern Pennsylvania to make sure.
I would offer that when it comes to school funding, the pandemic has distracted us from the underlying problem which existed prior to March. which is that our public schools are underfunded by the state. And that underfunding for our public schools results in over-reliance on property taxes at a local level to make up the difference. And so as eager as I am to make sure that we have the money necessary to provide the PPE and all the other steps to bring the kids back to school, we can't be distracted from the underlying problem, which continues, and that is an underfunding on a state level of our 500 school districts. If we were to do a better job of providing that state funding, we would have less reliance on property taxes, we would less reliance on school board members having to take that awful step because we pass along that obligation by our lack of.
Today, some action being taken by many of you to take a proactive stand by forming bipartisan teams to look at lessons learned, to look at laws, policies, and regulations, and whatever is necessary to move in a coordinated fashion to protect public health and safety for whatever the future brings. So in closing, we would like a sense from the panel on how these bipartisan partnerships are going and your closing thoughts. Reimagined sustainable future. Throw it out there, everyone to start. Or would like to jump in. Mr. McGillney smiling over you.
Well, we've listened to a lot about the state and federal groups. Honestly, I opened up a little earlier. Talk about the fact that the county's right here. Right where you live, right where you work. You work together every day. I just want to touch on a few things because I'm topics of work. Pointing towards the state. Number one, infrastructure is a big problem in the county. We all know that. We have like 270 bridges that we own in this county, many of which are deficient. Three of the major bridges in the process of getting repaired and brought up to standard. That's going to continue because we still have a lot of other bridges that have to get done. Roads are the same thing. Representative Carroll talked about transportation. We get money from those taxes and liquid fuels, etc. They're down. That amount of money is down. We're not going to get that normal grant that we get from the state. So it's a problem that we have to deal with, and we have to try to make the best of what we have. It's ongoing. A little bit about budgets. They talked about the budget at the state level, $5 billion. Our budget's not that big, but you're probably looking at a $5 million deficit in Luzerne County. And that ballpark figure. We don't know exactly what it's going to be because we're not there yet. We're going to start our budget process October the 13th. We have 2 months to work on that budget. By December 15th, we have to pass the budget. And it has to be a balanced budget also. Just like the state has to have a balanced budget. But we have to do a full year. We can't do partial. We have to do a complete year. So we have our challenges ahead of us. Education, obviously, I'm a former educator, and I know the challenges that schools have. I understand the funding issues that schools have. Much of those are translated over to the county. We need funding. We have challenges. We need technology. We have a lot of things that schools are working with. We're challenged by. We see that also in the county. As far as the question itself, this is an ongoing situation. We're doing our very best to try to meet the challenges. We don't know all the challenges right now. Just so you realize, I happen to be a member of the airport board for the international airport with first transit. Right now, our passengers are down like 70% from last year. That means we have less people coming through, less people buying tickets, less revenues. Fortunately, we were able to get some money through the CARES Act. But right now, yesterday, the airlines laid off 50,000 people across the country because their funding ran out. That affects our local people. I think with 30 to 50 people we need stimulus packages. We need to have the creative measures and funding sources to keep these businesses alive until we can figure out how we can accomplish what we need to accomplish with these conditions, whether it be science, pharmaceutical companies, wherever. We're open. We want anybody's help. If you have any great ideas, please let us know. But we need a lot of help. We need everybody to work together. I want to congratulate these people here with me on the dais this morning. I also want to mention that our federal legislators were very, very helpful, providing things like food for food banks, for food distributions. Those are things that the federal people came forward with. I was on multiple calls with those people for many, many hours, and they are all looking to try to help and find solutions. I want to congratulate them, and I want to thank the people here at Diocese for all the work they've done. It's important that we continue to do the work as we go forward. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in on that question?
In terms of, lessons learned, the power of regional cooperation. We've gone through several success stories here in northeastern Pennsylvania in the face of an unprecedented pandemic. We referenced Act 66, the local resource manufacturing tax credit that has the potential to create over 4,400 jobs here in northeastern Pennsylvania. Every legislator in northeastern Pennsylvania, everyone here today, everyone representing 10, 12 county region in northeastern Pennsylvania, Democrat, Republican, voted yes on that piece of legislation. I want to thank those in attendance and everyone watching at home for supporting that legislation to create new economic development opportunities here in northeastern Pennsylvania. The Northeastern Pennsylvania Nursing Home SOS program, again, regional cooperation, 5-county regional cooperation, Lackawanna County, Luzerne County, local nonprofits, regional nonprofits coming together to help our nursing home residents and those heroes on the front line, those healthcare workers working in those long-term care facilities. The code enforcement partnership that brought together 30 municipalities to make sure that our workplaces that were essential, that remained open, that never closed during the pandemic, were safe. And then I want to tell one story, and I know this is the Wilkes-Barre Chamber of Commerce, but I do want to highlight the great work done by the Hazleton Chamber of Commerce, particularly Lehigh Valley Health Network, and John Fletcher, President and CEO of Lehigh Valley Health Network. We had a phone call every day during the early days of the pandemic. They were certainly the epicenter of the spike of COVID cases in Luzerne County. Large Latino community, language barriers were an issue. There was a lot of issues that were leading to that spike in Hazleton. They put together a team, a diverse team, and we were able to adapt and innovate on the fly. And again, there wasn't communication. There was a communication gap between the Latino community and what was going on in our world. So we got innovative. We were able to partner with native son Joe Matt, the former manager of the Cubs, now out in Los Angeles. And he, along with former Congressman Lou Barletta, we were able to bring Major League Baseball to Hazleton and put together Spanish PSAs to make sure that the Latino community knew how serious this virus was, and they needed to adhere to the CDC guidelines. Luzerne County, Dave Pedrick, Tim McGinney, they stepped up and did a geofence Facebook ad that reached tens of thousands of members of the Latino community. That helped mitigate COVID in the greater Hazleton area. That regional code enforcement partnership, getting into those the meatpacking plants and the logistics centers in greater Hazleton, that wouldn't have happened without regional collaboration. And I just want to commend every local leader, every community leader, every business leader for stepping up and recognizing that regional collaboration and a regional approach to this terrible challenge that faces not only the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, not only our community, but the world. Regional collaboration is what has helped us get beyond, helped flatten the curve, and helped us try to revive this economy. We've seen a little hope over the summer months, a 6% increase in state revenue. That's not going to be enough to close a $5 billion funding gap. There's going to either have to be a federal stimulus package that helps states. Right now, the federal stimulus package, we have a little bit over $1 billion in reserve. That money cannot be used to offset the state budget. If Congress relaxes that provision and allows us to use that, that's still only $1 billion. We're going to have to look at raising new revenue or drastic cuts. We don't want to make cuts to education. We don't want to make cuts to human services programs. So hopefully we can partner now with our federal counterparts in that regional approach to battling this pandemic.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much. We're winding up. Let's call Rico up with the closing remarks. Rico.
Thanks very much, Andy. I want to thank our elected officials for joining us today at this legislative breakfast hosted by our partners from Geisinger. We really appreciate the dialogue, and more important, what you're doing for our community and our businesses during the COVID crisis. It is absolutely in these times of crisis that you realize the importance of good leadership. And I want to thank our strong legislative and county support, our business community, strong support of our first responders, healthcare professionals, and critical workers to ensure we have you in the valley. And I want to thank our socially distanced audience here today, and for those of you who live stream for joining us here today as well. We look forward to a reimagined post-COVID future that gets us back to a sense of normalcy, a sense of sustainability, and a sense of renewed growth. Finally, we look forward to seeing you at our upcoming events. Thank you for the support of the Chamber. Thank you very much. Have a great day.